Hello, hello. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about Claudine Gay, president of Harvard, who has just been embroiled in scandal after scandal with plagiarism. But before the plagiarism thing broke out, like the plagiarism stuff was like a nail in the coffin to some other things that had been happening. Like they had different presidents of different schools go before Congress and they were questioned about antisemitism, and it didn't go well. And so this was just a continued barrage, but people don't want to get rid of her. Um, I think because she's black, because they don't want to admit that there's just a hierarchy, an intersectional hierarchy, and if people, if students got caught doing what she has done as being the top person, they would be expelled, and so she needs to be let go for obvious reasons. Um, but I think she's being kept for obvious reasons as well. So we'll be talking about that. Also, crazy immigration story that I read. I think it was last night, or maybe it was this morning, but about how long it's going to take some people to get immigration hearings because the system is so backlogged. It's just incredible how broken our system is, how unsecure our border is, and how much of a true hassle this is, not only for Americans and our resources, running thin, but also the people who might have real asylum claims who are being bogged down because the system is just overrun. So we'll be talking about that and some other things today. But before we jump into everything, I'd like to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate, because it does cost a streamer on my website, all that stuff, so you guys can support in that way. I very much do appreciate it. If you guys are watching on Facebook, you guys can send stars. For watching on YouTube, you guys can send super chats and also super thanks as well. Thank you to those who watch live. Thank you to those of you who watch the show back later. Look at different merchandise that we have. Check out our store and our website, blacktnews.com. And also, you guys can check out some of my books that I've written that are available on Amazon. I have 17 books that are published. 2 are nonfiction, the rest are fiction. And I got stuff for kids, and I got stuff for like young and new adults. So go ahead and check out my stuff. My one of my nonfiction books is Faith Book, and the other book does have something to do with theology, but it's of course God is blatantly against abortion, and that's available. That covers theology, it covers rights, it covers science, and all sorts of different things. So it covers the exceptions that people talk about and how should those be handled. And I think it's really important to talk about those subjects and be able to convey your morals and your ethics, and not really shrug and shy away from it. Someone the other day is like, we need to just make things more secular. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, because people will, even if you don't mention it, people will bring it up. People will accuse you. I've seen people accuse atheists of secretly being Christian because they have a pro-life view. So you might as well just battle out ideas and show how you have a consistent worldview and why yours is better. So my goal was to help people be able to do that. And I also think there's a huge need in the church for it as well. I want to mention this before we get into the stories of the day. I wrote an article that I hope you guys check out, that I believe is very important, that I hope people will share. And it has to do with the topic of abortion bans and why they're not mean. Sometimes people, it seems like even on the pro-life side, accept this narrative that if there's an abortion ban in place, then their government is forcing women to do things against their own body, etc. Blah blah blah. They'll say forced to do birth, forced to carry the baby, forced to have the baby. If the government is forcing people to have babies, uh, uh wow, that's sexual assault. That's a crime, or it's a war crime. So that's not what's happening. People get impregnated usually by consensual means. Um, they're not forcing you to carry the baby. They didn't make the sperm meet the egg and fertilize, and they didn't like place it in your uterus. They didn't make you carry it, and they're not making you have go through birth, because once you're pregnant, it's inevitable that you are going to have a child exit from your womb. That's what birth is. Maybe hopefully the child will be alive. It's possible the child will be stillborn or you'll miscarry. But the government has nothing to do with that either. So this language of forced birth, forced, etc., it's technically not true in any sense of the word. Um, and it's important that when people use that language, they are trying to shift who's the aggressor in the situation, when the reality is an abortion ban is saying, hey, you can't actually rip your child from limb to limb and then crush their skull. You can't burn them in saline. You shouldn't poison them, inject a needle and make them have some kind of cardiac arrest and then pull out their body in pieces over several days time. You shouldn't cut off the resources, so their source of blood and how they're getting their oxygen and all this other stuff, nutrients, um, are cut off to them, so they shrivel up and they die. Like we're saying, you can't do this kind of violence against your child. And if imagine outside of the womb, if we're like, hey, you can't chop someone to pieces with an axe, Lizzie Borden, you can't do that. Would you say that was an act of force? I don't think so. I don't, and even if you wanted to think of it that way, some people should be stopped if they are committing some kind of human rights violation and robbing people of life, especially in terribly brutal ways. So I see too often, well, all the time, people who are for abortion push that language. I saw Mike Cernovich and Coulter recently use such language. I've seen people who are like, will consider themselves to be abolitionists on TikTok debating people, and they're like, "You guys just want to force women?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, yes, we do." And they mean not kill the babies, but I'm just like, don't even accept that language, because this is a huge intellectual barrier that people have to overcome, to realize that the government does have very few areas in life where we want them to function and feel that they have a valid role, and they have a valid role in ensuring our liberties. And one of those liberties that trumps basically all the others is life. You do not have full bodily autonomy to do whatever you want, because you can't use your bodily autonomy to go murder someone else, right? There's a line there, and it's not that the baby has more rights than the woman. They're both equal, inherently valuable, but the right to life there trumps your right to go kill somebody. You don't have the right to do that. So um, that is a big intellectual hurdle that people need to clear, to really go forward. And I think with this debate, and for pro-life people to get back on track, or abolitionist, or how you ever want to label yourself, if people just see it as, oh, it's too mean to say that you can't dismember your baby, like that, it sounds crazy, but people view it that way. So we need to make people uh say what they mean, and not just say you're forcing. No, how, be specific. So anyway, it's an important article, and I think it's called The False Narrative of Force. And it's if you go to my columns on my website, it's one of the first things that you'll find. It right now should be the first thing that you find. So go ahead, check that out, and share it around. again, it's a really important article, I believe. And thank you to those who have read it and said it was well written and other stuff. And it's kind of long. It's like not uber long. I used to write fan fiction chapters longer than that, but um it's maybe about it's more than 1,000 words, but maybe it's like 12, maybe it's longer, but I think it's less than 15, but 100. But go ahead and check it out. It's worth your time. It's worth your time. Anyway, let's move on. So I posted this meme last night. It's not a meme, actually. It's a luggage tag that I saw on Twitter that I decided to share. I have no idea where you can get these. I guess I can look at my Twitter real quick to see where I saw this, but um that is a luggage tag. And if you don't recognize a person there, which a lot of people did, because a lot of people on YouTube and Facebook had a hoot about it, that is Sam Brinton, who was a nuclear waste like guru that worked under the Biden administration, who identified as non-binary, and he would show up in dresses and women's suits and just women's clothes all the time. And he was stealing luggage. He'd go somewhere and he would just take the luggage and like nothing happened. Like when he got off the airplane. And one woman's luggage that he stole actually was a designer. So like custom designed stuff he took. Now the happy news that at least I reported that story when I heard about it some time ago, that the police were actually able to like give her stuff back, which is very nice. And I'm very glad, especially as a creative person, that first of all, what he was doing is gross and creepy and weird. And I would assume fetishy or whatever as well, because I don't know why not. I mean, maybe he found that it was an easy way to steal. I stealing things from an airport doesn't sound like a great idea to me. I think you'd be better off. Shoplifting is not good either, but I guess in California you're more likely to get away with it without serious penalty. But yeah, stealing stuff from airports, that's crazy to me. But it's all crazy to me. It's all crazy to me. But it's not like he didn't have a job where he could buy nice things for himself. So I don't understand people like this. I know some people just have they're kleptos and they steal stuff. But to steal women's clothes that they've already worn, I'm gonna make the leap of logic here and say he's a creep. He's a creep. So brilliant luggage tag. The person who I had retweeted, Pamela Garfield Jagger, is the one who had the luggage tag. I don't know where she got it. I don't know where she got it, but it's great. Ooh, actually there's a store. On the Blaze Media. The Blaze Media is where you can get the tags. Okay. So I just did a little investigating right there. So Blaze Media actually has it looks like it's Ali Stuckley made it, because it says relatable on the back. Very clever. Very clever. It's $12. It's just so yeah, you guys can go ahead and it's not a paid advertisement, but it's a kudos, where all it's due. I wish I had thought of it. I wish I had thought of it. For some very niche luggage tag merch right there. Kudos to Allie. But yeah, he was a creep. What a awful story. And then there were some people who were trying to speak up about Sam Britton, saying that some stuff about his story as like a a person LGBT persons who suffered like through like a religious kind of conversion therapy type of abuse, like just a lot of things about his story didn't add up, but so many people were quick to embrace him because he's part of the alphabet mafia, and the Biden administration uplifted him, and he ended up being a complete creep, a complete weirdo. But that is part of the problem when you like diversity hires and you're so hell bent on meeting particular numbers and saying, oh, look how progressive and wonderful we are because we have this person who's gay who does this. The White House is full of people who are diversity hires who aren't particularly great at their job. Our press secretary is one of those people, and we'll get to her in a minute. But she checks a lot of boxes, and they're so concerned about some of their boxes. And Sam Britton was a box that should have never gotten checked. But I'll show the luggage tag one more time for anyone coming in late, so they know what I'm talking about. Again, Allie Stuckley apparently made these. You can find these at the Blaze and website and pick one up. Very clever. Very, very funny. Anyway, I do have another meme. Well, not meme, but headline from the Babylon Bee as we transition into our stories here. So, investigators beginning to suspect Claudine Gay's novel Larry Potter and the Sorcerer's Rock may have been plagiarized. So, what tipped you off, huh? She is embroiled in a lot of scandal as far as plagiarism goes. And these stories started to come out about her plagiarism after her disastrous, and I would say it was disastrous. Most people viewed it as disastrous. She went before Congress and was grilled and about Harvard and their policies with antisemitism. And as far as people calling for terrible things against Jews, she kept saying it depends on the context if it's violates our code of ethics. And there have been some people who have spoken up for people like her and the folks actually committing the horrible things, and they're like, okay, well, free speech is important, free speech this, free speech that. The problem is that everyone is aware of the fact that Harvard and a lot of these universities don't actually care about free speech, that if you were calling for the genocide or harm to other sorts of groups, that people would not rally behind you and be like, yeah, you have the free speech to say that about the blacks and the gays they wouldn't do that. Kyle, can't think of his last name, but he was one of the Kyle I can't think of his name. One of the let me see. I'm trying to find his name really. Kyle Kashiv. Don't know how to say his last name, but he was one of he's a conservative activist who survived the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, and he's on the right. He's still like pro gun and all that stuff. He was. Let me just pull up his face so you guys know what I'm talking about. Since I can't say his name, I apologize. I can't remember how to say it. He was admitted into Harvard, and he actually had his admissions pulled because he used some racial slurs in a group chat when he was like 16. So if Harvard can be like, oh nope, someone like that can't when they were 16 saying stuff in a private message group, we can't have them into Harvard, but you have students who are older than he is, obviously going around um saying terrible things about Jews in Israel and so on that are far more problematic. And you're like, free speech doesn't matter, context, etc. So anyway, I'm going to play some of that hearing. I don't think we had really, I think we talked about it, but I don't think we actually played anything on the show when that was breaking news. But I just want to take you through that a little bit before we get into this Vox article that's related to DEI. But Claudine Gay is in trouble.
At Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's targeted at Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of antisemitism? I will ask you one more time. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric.
And is it anti-Semitic rhetoric?
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying, harassment, intimidation, that is actionable conduct, and we do take action.
So the answer is yes, that calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign. These are unacceptable answers across the board.
Yeah, so it was a interesting hearing that people are just like flabbergasted. She people wanted her to resign, but people within Harvard really stood by her. So then these stories started to come out about her plagiarizing a lot of stuff. So even the New York Times has now written a piece about some of her plagiarism. So it's pretty bad. But I don't know if they will or they won't get rid of her. But the truth is, at this point of time, it would be unfair really not to, because so many students will live in fear of like having something similar, that could fall into plagiarism, or people being kicked out of school because they plagiarized something. And if anyone had done the amount of plagiarism that she does at Harvard, they would not be there anymore. So Jake Tapper pointed that out. And legally, if they decided to reprimand any students for this, what sort of recourse could they actually have against a student that wouldn't end in them countersuing?
Yeah, the big question, I think, in the future is, how will Harvard be able to punish any students found guilty of the same offense without inviting a lawsuit? Because if she gets away with something that students can't get away with, that could be messy legally for the school, which I'm sure Harvard's lawyers have thought about way before I just said that. Matt Egan, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so it doesn't look good for her. By the way, SNL did a skit about that hearing, and they decided to make fun of the Republicans rather than the presidents of the different colleges who were skating around saying, yeah, like if you call for genocide, that would be against our code of conduct. Again, if there was some other group, if they're like calling for genocide against Black people and so on, they would not have a hard time saying, yeah, that's totally against our code of conduct. But to the people who are like, oh, it's just free speech, we just need to allow free speech, etc. Harvard, again, does not play by any rules of just respecting free speech. These people, like Riley Gaines and who goes to all these schools in Ben Shapiro, and who, where they have to have security armed to the teeth, and poor Riley Gaines. I can't remember what school she was at, but people, they like, she had to like hide in a bathroom, and the students were like, "Oh, she gives us some money, we might let her go, or she pays us all X amount of dollars." And so she was hit and she was sped on, and people said terrible things to her. And what's her sin? Wanting men to not play in women's sports, and that's a topic that's something that's near and dear to her heart, because she actually had to compete against a male. And they had a situation where they were tied, and they're like, "Okay, well, we're gonna give the trophy to Leah, and you have to get yours later or whatever." And she's like, "How come, like, I can't hold the trophy?" And they're like, "Don't fight us on this." So she's been fighting ever since. By the way, I don't know who named her most problematic person of the year, but I saw her tweet that, and so she said it was an honor. I do have an interview with Riley Gaines. If you guys want to go check that out in my archive, but yeah, these schools are not bastions of free speech. So just to pretend like now is the time when it comes to you want to defend your students who are saying anti-Semitic stuff is just nuts. It's just nuts. Anyway, Vox has decided to write an article about this Republican perspective as they're pouncing. Earlier this week, we talked about, it was Monday, we talked about how there was an article about the guy who did a sex tape in the Senate. And he was a Senate staffer, and he was in the hearing room. And I think it was NBC News did an article like conservatives alleged that Senate staffer, made tape or whatever. And at that point in time, when they made that article, it wasn't I don't know if you want to say that to just legally cover your butt, but everyone was aware, whether they meant to be aware or not, that this had happened, that there was evidence that this had happened. But they framed it as conservatives allege, rather than alleged video of this, or video of this alleged person. They had to frame it through the eyes of conservatives are upset. So because they want people on the other side to be like, oh, instinctively, oh, conservatives are upset about this, so I have to be less upset about this, even though this is something that I probably would be upset about in normal circumstances. However, my enemy is upset by it, therefore I have to make some kind of excuses for it, and we got to soften the blow of how bad this actual thing is, because we hate conservatives. So stories usually become conservatives pounce, rather than being about the actual story, the actual thing that the person did. So Vox wrote an article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but so I'm going to tell you guys the title, so you guys can go back and read the whole thing if you feel like it. But how Republicans are weaponizing anti-Semitism to take down DEI. So that's their take on it. that not about anti-Semitism just being so awful, but how Republicans are noticing the anti-Semitism going around, and then they're using it to try to take down DEI. Now, that president of Harvard, she's part of a hierarchy. You can't just take down the black woman here, even though she has her position, partly because she has cheated along the way to get to where she is, and that's not up for debate. There's plenty of evidence for it now. Even New York Times and other folks are clearly looking at the evidence and admitting that this is a thing beyond like Chris Rufo or something making it up. It's actually true. She's actually plagiarized quite a bit. And she still has her job. I don't know how long she'll keep it, but they are dedicated to their token person. And I'm not saying she's not a smart woman or anything like that, or isn't talented and so on. But is there someone else who's far more deserving of that job and would obviously cause them less scandal? Yeah. And it's definitely not a good thing that people have a bad opinion about Harvard now. That every time someone mentions Harvard now, it's about anti-Semitism. It's about Plagiarism. That's not what people want to think about when they're like, oh, you went to Harvard. There's a TV show, Suits, that is pretty good. There's some like things that are pretty unbelievable in there. Lawyer shows are so fast paced and interesting compared to like when you actually watch trials. It's just the energy is nowhere on the level of like Harvey and Mike going into a courtroom or whatever. It's not like that at all in real life. But I enjoyed the show. It was on USA for a minute. I didn't watch it when it came on live. I watched it on I think Amazon Prime, I guess, is when I watched all the episodes. And you can watch, I think, all but the last season on Netflix right now, I think. But good show. But the law firm that he was trying to get into, it's about a guy who's doesn't actually have a law degree, but he practiced. He studied the bar because he would take tests for people, and he has a photographic memory. So he was just kind of always knocking stuff out of the park. Super smart guy, and so he was hired in by this guy Harvey Specter, who works at this law firm, and they only recruit Harvard. They only hire people from Harvard. That was their thing, only Harvard, and that was a big staple and tradition within their law firm to just show sort of prestige. So and Harvard was always such a big deal in the series to get in there, to, you could be the best of the best of the best and still not be good enough to get in there. And now people hear Harvard and they go, ooh, like that. That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. But anyway, how Republicans are weaponizing anti-Semitism to take down DEI. The discourse about anti-Semitism on U.S. college campuses has arrived at an unlikely place, as Jewish students speak out about a rise in anti-Semitic sentiment amid Israel's bombardment of Gaza. Republicans have placed the blame on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI programs. According to conservative lawmakers who have now held several hearings on anti-Semitism, these initiatives meant to create welcoming learning environments for students from marginalized communities are one reason some Jewish students feel fearful and unprotected on campus. I think DEI is a fraud, and what we're seeing now on campus is the proof of that, said Burgess Owens, the Utah Republican chair of the House of Higher Education Subcommittee, at a hearing in November. Pause that. A lot of people are now saying DEI is a fraud, like the whole system is ridiculous. And it's not because the system itself is just conducive to producing anti-Semitism or whatever. Well, I guess it could be. I'll get back to that point. Well, I'll circle back to that. The issue is that they pride themselves in having all this diversity. They pride themselves in their hierarchy in these different cultures and the need for it, etc., etc. It's many times can be anti-white, so there's racism within it because and they don't. It's not so much they prioritize people with different worldviews to lend to the conversation. It's so much about your skin color and having that different oppressor hierarchy, how they view the world or whatever. So the issue that a lot of people are finding out now is that a lot of Jewish people thought that they were within the hierarchy. They thought they were in the diverse group that was, I don't know, protected or loved or cared for, special. And now they're finding out that they are actually not only bottom rung, they are looked at with anger and outrage, and they consider themselves in the oppressor class. Many people have told me, how dare you stand with Israel? You're brown, you should stand with the brown people. They're not brown, they're white oppressors, etc. And that's how they view them. So that's why I said circle back to it can induce anti-Semitism if they correlate Jews with white people and go that route. So it's interesting when there's some kind of crazed Trump voting person who's anti-Semitic who does something in the media, something violent or whatever. They're like, aha, it's because Trump is anti-Semitic and how dare they attack the Jews. But when there's, people on college campuses, harassing people to the point where they feel like they have to barricade themselves in the library, um, or other stuff like that, then it's, oh, well, it's just free speech. And those darn Republicans trying to weaponize DEI. Or I'm sorry, trying to weaponize anti-Semitism to come after DEI. So the issue is that this coalition of togetherness with the different minorities and stuff, that it's not really real. Like there's no real merit. And I mean, there's never really any merit in just looking at people's skin colors and just assuming things anyway. But the coalition will eventually start falling apart when you start just pulling at the seams a bit. So there's a lot of left-leaning Jews who woke up one day and found out that all of their friends don't really like them too much. And the coalition that they thought they were part of, that they helped to build and fund, they're not really in there. So that's the issue with DEI, and that's why people feel that it's a big fat fraud. That's what people's issues are with it. Since Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, critics have lambasted university administrators for doing little to shield students from anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism. Islamophobia and it's like they can't just talk about anti-Semitism. They have to throw all those things together. There is not some kind of huge backlash comparatively with Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism with it's just not in the same league right now. I'm not saying there's not racism or even hate crimes being committed, but it's okay to have an article about anti-Semitism and not mention Islamophobia and all the other kind of stuff, which, by the way, Islamophobia, we're talking about Islam, which is a religion. So that's a bunch of ideologies. So people having criticisms of ideologies and the I don't know, historical accuracy and all sorts of different things that they might have issues with the religion is not the same as people not liking the Jews. It's just not on the same level. Jewish students have said that rallies for Palestine have left them in shock, as some have seen or heard anti-Semitic language and watched peers brush off Hamas's atrocities against Israelis. Muslim and Arab students told Vox about slurs being hurled at them, hijabs being snatched off, and unwelcoming institutional messages and policies that ostracize them as pro-Israel campaigns, intimidate and dox them. They've lamented campus environments that seem silent on Israel's war crimes against Palestinians. By doxing, the people have Harvard, they put out, a letter very early on blaming the atrocities of October 7th on Israel. And so the names of the kids associated with those groups that sign on to it, there was like a mobile billboard that was going on with their names on it. There's been groups that have filmed different people tearing down missing posters of people, and then they're like, they find out who they are and stuff. So that's a little more doxy than saying, hey, you guys are part of this group, and this group publicly put out this letter blaming putting all the blame on Israel as opposed to the terrorists who have agency and decided to do what they did. Granted, we didn't know the depths of how quite awful all the stuff that happened was, but it was pretty horrific at the time, enough to know that they shouldn't have done that. So I mean, I this article is Vox, so I think it's obviously a bit skewed. And they said they limited campus environments to seem silent on Israel's war crimes against Palestinians. You're going to have to be specific about what you mean as war crimes, because I'm not aware of them. They are not indiscriminately bombing. They are they warn civilians to get out of areas. When you talk about different points where they may hit or close to them, different areas can be targets that they still need to go after if they assess that there's the terrorist activity there, but you still have to try to get civilians out, which they have. They've gone out of their way to try to make sure that they limit casualties as much as possible, but war is a terrible, awful thing, and casualties do happen, though the numbers are kind of sketchy, and they will also include their combatants in the numbers of the people who were killed as well. So I don't know if and when we'll know real numbers of the sort of damage that's going on, but Israel, you always have to remember the context of Hamas will continue to hurt them again if they get the opportunity. There was a spokesperson for Hamas who actually thanked Canada for calling for a ceasefire. So Hamas appreciates everyone who wants Israel to lay down their arms while they regroup and prepare to kill more Jews. So for Republican lawmakers and conservative pundits, the pain of these communities, particularly Jewish communities, has brought fresh momentum for their growing campaign against DEI and their eternal crusade against higher education institutions, which they see as liberal bastions of progressive indoctrination. Where's the lie, though? They're right. They argue DEI is a bureaucratic industry that undermines merit in favor of giving special opportunities to select groups based on race, which they believe is unnecessary, and that the industry has ignored the needs of Jewish students, increasing the incidence of of antisemitism. The peculiar connection being drawn between DEI and antisemitism is concerning Jewish students and DEI experts told Vox, although some agree that DEI could do more to address the needs of Jewish students. There's been very strong simmering war of attrition against DEI for some time at universities, and somehow these two things started to merge together to the point where we got these congressional hearings, said Rabbi Shal Majid, who teaches Jewish studies at Harvard and Dartmouth College. It seems to me that the issue at the December 5th hearing was anti-Semitism and also not anti-Semitism. It seemed like it was about DEI and Rep. Elise Stefanik's interest in attacking it rather than the rise of anti-Semitism on campus. DEI has received mounting pushback since June, when the Supreme Court struck down decades of affirmative action precedent allowing race to be considered in higher education admissions decisions. Yeah, because people weren't fond of discrimination and were arguing more merit-based. Many Republicans want every institution stripped of DEI in a fashion that would risk squandering the opportunity to thoughtfully re-examine it. DEI has its problems, said Eddie S. Glaude Jr., the McDonald Distinguished University Professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. He cites the need for institutions to return to value of diversity itself instead of focusing on checking off a diversity compliance list. They've made a caricature of DEI in this context, and DEI is not the issue here. We read a little bit more, but addressing anti-Semitism should require more attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion, not less. There's no question that DEI programs have not included Jewish community concerns. It's been evident for a long time and needs to be addressed, said Stacey Burdett, an independent anti-Semitism expert who works with the Cohen Institute for Leadership and Public Service at the University of Maine, and testified at a recent hearing on anti-Semitism. But dismantling a system that protects marginalized minorities has nothing to do with the interests of fears of Jews who want to just live without harassment and anti-Semitism. But the issue here is that their need and their desire for DEI, and because they feel that they need it so much because they have like this bias against, they talked about they want to protect and uplift these minority groups because they think there's something inherently bad about it not having these minority groups there, and if it's too white, it's a bad thing. They think if it's too white, it's a bad thing. Because they have something against white people. So eventually you're going to get pressed in the situation where if you see the Jews as the white people and you're in conflict with these brown people, they're going to continue siding with the brown people because their hierarchy has taught them somehow that's moral to do, because you have to always side with the oppressor as opposed to the side with the oppressed as opposed to the oppressor. That's just how they see the dynamics of that world. So if you have people who are like into the BLM stuff, who sided with the Palestine, stuff like the Patrisse Cullors, and they wanted to tear down Israel, and that sort of rhetoric permeates toward the minds of the people, you get this conflict. Like the Jews thought they were in the group. They thought they were protecting the minority group class. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this can go back to like, with some time, they'll be like, oh no, you guys are actually in the club, until something else like this breaks down or breaks out rather. And then they'll have to learn again that when push comes to shove, like, no, we're actually not too fond of you guys. You can stand there and look pretty, but we don't actually like you too much. Like we're gonna use you. It's funny that they're mad at Republicans, thinking that they're using this anti-Semitism that's legitimately going on as some kind of cudgel to bash DEI, when our issue with DEI is that it actually doesn't protect these groups. I mean, we have issues beyond that, but the issue is that it's a farce. It's just a farce to be anti-white, you know? I've seen it time and time again throughout like cultural discussions and political discussions and educational discussions, etc. You know, they see some kind of virtue in seeing less white faces, not people of merit who've achieved certain things. Less white faces is a good thing because whiteness is bad. Whiteness is bad. And white people are the oppressors. They can't even know what it's like to, only they can really be racist. Other groups can't be racist because they haven't possessed institutional power. The brown people, they've been terrorized by the white people. And when they find it necessary, they just view the Jews as white adjacent or just white people. And that's the issue. That's the issue. They don't want equality. They keep saying equity. That's their thing. They don't want people to be treated equally. They want people to be treated equitably. And so they believe that there's been so much racism and all this stuff throughout history that treating everyone the same, giving everyone the same sort of opportunity isn't going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. If you don't believe that, go read some CRT books. Go read the Democrat Party platform. They reject neutral race policies. That's why they're so mad about the affirmative action thing. And they mention it in the article. They're mad about affirmative action being overturned because they believe still in special privileges for particular groups, because if you have even playing fields, it's not fair to them, which is crazy. Equality is immoral to them. They want equity. They want someone in a lever of power picking winners and losers. And that's the only way that they can see some kind of system of restoration. So, no, the Republicans, I don't think are using some kind of special circumstance to rail after DEI. It's just kind of a matter of fact thing that they're mentioning it. They've been going after it. They continue to go after it because it promotes unfairness for the sake of meeting particular quotas. And the agenda is just to have diversity. If you look at the Biden administration, they have a lot of people there who shouldn't be there, who are qualified to be there, but they tick the right kind of boxes. With that being said, let's move on to a different topic. Let's talk about immigration for a little bit, because I speaking of diversity hire, I want to talk about our press secretary, who's so awful at her job, and they're not particularly competent. But I saw something that was so crazy as far as immigration. And I'm going to play a clip from Kareem, and then I'm going to play a clip from Kirby talking about immigration. And but the story, there's crazy stuff about the border that comes out all the time, because it's a constant stream of people coming in at unprecedented sort of numbers. But there was a reporter for Fox News based in LA, Bill Milligan, who said a Colombian woman who crossed illegally into El Paso, Texas, and was released into the U.S. was given an ICE check in the date of New York City. And check this, guys. Check this. In 2031. 2031. Her immigration attorney tells me that it's one of the most shocking things he's ever seen in his nearly 30 years of immigration law. Colkin, I guess this lawyer, tells me that his client is a legitimate asylum seeker with what he feels is an airtight case, but because the system is so backlogged with illegitimate asylum claims, he's not sure they'll ever get a chance to argue it in court with her next check in 8 years into the future. It made me realize the Biden administration is basically providing backdoor amnesty for anyone who wants to show up at the border, he said. So 8 years before they see you in court to argue that you have a legitimate asylum case. So what happens throughout all that time while people are waiting? She may have a case, may not have the case. Okay? A lot of people who are coming, you'll see videos of people coming across the border. There'll be young adult men who are coming mostly for economic opportunities. And America's a great country. I understand why people would want to be here, right? But you're not supposed to come here illegally. Sorry, closed up for shop. Make sure you actually try to come in the right way. These people won't even come through the legal port of entry. So she may have a case, she may not. But what about all these people who are who are claiming they have a legitimate asylum case, and it's years out? So what about the justice to get them just deported? They're going to be here for years in the United States. Who knows if you will ever see them again in court to make their claim, to hear whether they should or shouldn't stay. What about setting up roots here? What if they, I don't know, start a family in all that time? Get a good job, go to school, all that stuff. If you're setting up big roots and you don't even get a case for years and years, and then you have to worry about being deported at that point in time, you're just gonna fuel politicians saying, no, they've been here for 7-8 years, etc. You know, and our system failed them by not giving them a speedy sort of trial and whatever, speedy hearing and stuff. And now they've had jobs, and now their kids go to school, or they went to school, and etc. Blah blah blah. And they've paid taxes. Oh, they've paid taxes. Since they've paid taxes, by gosh, now we need amnesty. It's such a broken system. And I've seen so many crazy things with the immigration crisis right now, but this one just blew me away. That much time to check in court for your asylum case. 2031. We clearly do not have a sustainable system. Isn't it crazy that they hired all those IRS agents, but to make sure that you're paying taxes on your, I don't know, $601 in your Venmo account or your Cash App account, so that make sure they're going after you, and Biden can claim that they're not, but they totally are, totally will, as opposed to like trying to get this situation under control, trying to have more people go down to the border, working overtime so people can be deported and go back to where they're supposed to be. Because most of these people are not coming with legitimate asylum claims. Most of them are seeking, and again, I understand America's a wonderful place, but you got to go through the right proper channels, because there's people who have gone through the proper channels and have to wait. And there are people who are waiting, and it's really not fair to them, to the people who've come over here legally and did the right thing. And we don't know who you are. We don't know who these people are. A lot of these people are coming into the country. There are women and children who are abused along the way. It's just a terrible system that we basically encouraged. Not basically, that we have encouraged. There's people who come at the border and be like, thank you, President Biden. Because to them, they believe the border is wide open. And when you're going to like automatically basically be here for 8 years, how can you argue it's not a wide open system? How can you argue that it is not? So Kareem was asked about the state of affairs with immigration, and she said, well, it just ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows.
And what we're seeing here at the border, the migration flow, increased migration flow, certainly it ebbs and flows, and we're at a time of the year where we're seeing more at the border, and it's not unusual. This is an immigration system that has been broken for decades, and the president has taken this very seriously to try to do more.
No, he hasn't. It just ebbs and flows, and we're going through a flow process, guys. It's just a flow process right now. It's just, it's just that time of the year, just that time of the month where it just flows. No, it's not like the border is not like your period. We're just, it's not like that. You create bad policies that incentivize people to come. You incentivize that. You discourage people from trying to actually secure the border. You won't cut good deals to do anything meaningful to stop the flow. This is an incompetent administration, has been from the jump. I will never forget listening to Jen Psaki. They're asking about what the administration was doing to curb or discourage people from coming here, and then she's like, "Oh, well, there's some cartoons that we paid for, etc. Blah blah blah." And I was just like, she was start listing like media things that they try to do. I'm just floored, and I'm like, she thinks some darn cartoons are gonna just stop people from coming up to the United States of America. And that was like one of the first times I just kind of felt dread, knowing how incompetent our leadership was or is. And then they asked her, like, well, do you have any evidence that any of the stuff is working? And she's like, well, we'll never know who decides not to come. So you're just blowing money and have no way to show the American people that it was successful. You're just admitting that you're probably lighting the cash on fire. And I know when it's not your cash, you don't care so much how it gets spent. But we care. I would like to know how dumb gambles are paying off. But they obviously had no intention of ever being able to measure accomplishments in the least bit. So Kirby was also asked, like, about their efforts, and it's just not good enough.
On the border, we're talking to CBP officials who say that they're resourced to deal with about half the volume of encounters that they're seeing, that smugglers are putting migrants more and more at risk by dropping them off in more and more remote locations. Can you point to one thing the White House is doing right now that is making an impact on the border, is making an impact with this current surge?
Well, one of the things that obviously it's a big part of the supplemental request, and should we get the funding we're asking for, it will give us an opportunity to put more Border Patrol officers out there on the border. It will give us a chance to increase the asylum court officers and help with that process. And there's some physical security measures that are baked into that funding as well. So part and parcel of the supplemental request was very much recognizing that more needs to be done on border security, and we're willing to keep having that conversation with members of Congress. I would also add that one of the things that President Lopez Obrador and the President talked about today was trying to work on getting at the root causes of migration. We're seeing record levels of people. More people are on the move in this hemisphere than has been the case since World War II. There's a lot of factors, and part of that is, of course, dealing with instability, political and domestic instability in the region. So the work that we did with Venezuela here, not just to get Americans back, but to get the Maduro regime to ascribe to certain electoral reforms, that's important. That's important to help get at some of the root causes of migration.
People will still come, though, as long as they know the border is wide open. And again, America is a great place. People want to be here. You know, I'm not saying people don't love their other countries in whatever parts of the world, but it'd be worth trying to get here if you could, for most other countries in the world. And we don't know all the people who are coming, if they may mean us some harm, and that's why they want to come. They have caught terrorists at the border, people of interest. So think about all the people who they haven't caught. That's an issue as well. You can try to make other nations better so people will want to stay. And I think that's a noble cause, but it just kind of sounds like as I was growing up, 9/11 happened when I was in the 7th grade. And so they had, their missions in the Middle East, and the wars kind of evolved into some nation building activity. And so, and by the time, Bush got into he was elected. He was, of course he was the president during 9/11, but he got reelected. And but by the time he got to toward the end of his term, people were already sick of the war, and people were sick of nation building. That they were sick of that. And to me, it sounds like that kind of rhetoric is, well, we need to nation build elsewhere, and if we want to secure our border. And it's like, no, we need to secure our border. Make these other groups negotiate, do whatever you need to make them keep their people there. And whether it's remittance fees and like DeSantis said, to make fines or whatever, to have people to have less, to create less incentive for people coming over here. Do what you have to, deport people, whatever. But as long as people have this mentality that the border is wide open, they will come. But you can try to help these other folks and make other places America light in the meantime, but you got to do something about the border. You got to secure the border. And you're not going to be able to build other places to be some kind of US alternative in any immediate span of time. You've got to decentivize people from coming. That's just the truth. That's just the truth. And that should be their focus. As Jen Psaki said, we'll never know who decides not to come. So they have a talking point, but you don't know. There's no way to gauge their success on that. They don't plan to have something in place so they can tell you definitively their success or not. What we do know that we are seeing unprecedented numbers, and it's not just because it ebbs and flows. Okay, well, why did it ebb rather than flowed when Trump was in office? Because people still came to the border, tried to cross and other stuff like that, but there was definitely a different mentality that people had with Trump in office versus with Biden. People didn't come to the border and like, oh yeah, we're so grateful for President Trump. Thank you for like welcoming us in, basically, blah blah blah. People have that attitude with Biden. People were, as soon as like Trump was defeated in the election, they're like, yeah, we're coming for Biden because Biden's gonna let us in. And then we do stupid stuff. This administration does stupid stuff. Like, do you guys remember the horsewhip scandal where they're whipping migrants who are crossing the border because there was like Somali people coming or something, and there was a horse, people on horses, and they're whipping these people. Like, no, those control the horses. You wouldn't whip people. No, they were reins. They weren't they were reins, like horse reins. They weren't whips at all. And then they did like investigation and all this stuff when it wasn't necessary because they just felt like so deeply that, well, we're technically the bad guys, so we have to punish our own side. Like, no, you were doing something righteous when you were protecting our border. That's what you're supposed to do. You're the government. If we don't have borders, we don't have a nation. And it doesn't make sense for these people to allow other people to come in and nation build here. They're coming to nation build here, basically. And they're going to it's fine to have legal immigration where people come in, they want to do the work, they've waited their turn, and they want to be Americans. And they want to be part of the melting pot. But people coming in, the first thing they do is disrespect our immigration laws. That's a bad sign. And again, I can understand people wanting to come here, but you got to wait in line. We have to know who you are. We have to know, are you bringing in any sort of diseases? Do you have ill intentions? Where are you actually from? Are there any warrants for your arrest? Are you some kind of criminal? We need to know. We deserve to know. But instead, people are coming in. There's a lot of people we're missing, drugs, other stuff coming in. And then they're being told that their court date is in 8 freaking years. That is crazy. That is crazy. Anyway, that is all that I have for you all today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com. Check out different content from my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at the website, blacktnews.com/donate, because it does cost to stream and run my website, all that stuff. So if you guys can, again, I appreciate it. Check out different merch that we have, different t-shirts and mugs and so on. And check out my books that I have. I have 17 that I've written all together. So if you go to Amazon and search my name, Christina Elbar, you'll find my stuff. But if you go to blacktnews.com and go to the merchandise page, there's a banner that'll take you to my book website where you guys can learn more. And again, I want to encourage you guys to check out the article that I posted. Merry Christmas. I see a Merry Christmas down there from Patty P. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Merry Christmas. And thank you to all you guys watching in the chat. And again, people who watch it back later. I do plan to stream tomorrow, and I guess that'll be the I guess the last stream before Christmas. I do plan on streaming next week after Christmas, so we'll have a couple more episodes before the year is out. But isn't it wild? Christmas is so close. The new year is so close. And then we'll just have a crazy 2024 from there. I'm sure it's going to be wild, but yeah, Merry Christmas. And but please check out that article that I wrote, that's titled The False Narrative of Force, or the Narrative of Force, that I have on my website regarding a really important topic, I think, in the whole abortion debate. That I know there's a narrative that the pro-abortion side pushes, but the anti-abortion side falls for it too, and adapts that language. And it's really important that we reject it. So please go check out that article and share it around. And thank you guys very much again, and I will see you tomorrow.